We say to girls,
what is your podcast?
you can have ambition, but not too much.
Gonna be yapping and cackling away?
Naturally.
If I looked feminine, I would not be taken seriously.
I'm just a girl.
It's amazing how much you can get if you quietly, clearly, and authoritatively demand it.
Here we
She
go.
goes on the market.
Yeah. I just want to point out that I am wearing a sweater and you are wearing a tank top.
Always.
And
Always
if
and
that is
forever.
not a clear indication that one of us lives in a tropical paradise and the other one lives in the Pacific Northwest where it rains and is cold right now, I don't know what else could be.
That's right. We are an ocean away, but we are together in spirit, and we are just cycling through life together, sort of. Maybe. I don't know. We'll find out maybe in this episode. That was a weird analogy, huh?
We're just cycling through life. And I'm like, all right, are we talking about a karmic cycle? Are we talking about bicycling? Are we talking about
A real estate
menstrual
cycle?
cycling? Real estate cycle?
Menstrual
the
cycle, a
market
moon cycle.
It could honestly be anything.
It's probably all of the things.
Yes, and.
Yes, and well, I'm Amber Haley coming to you from the Big Island of Hawaii.
And I'm Rebekah Daniels coming from the rainy Washington state.
Let's get into it today. So we were reviewing all of the many, many, many things that we hope to cover on this podcast. And one of the very first things you wanted to talk about was cycles. What inspired this?
So I'm currently in my luteal cycle. And when I ended up crying 4 times on Sunday, I'm like, we should talk about this. What did I cry about? Nothing important. It was important in the moment. But it's one of those things where 3 days ago, would it have bothered me? Would I have been crying? No, I would not have. But I was on Sunday.
Now, I wasn't trying to laugh at your luteal cycle and your feelings. I really wasn't. I thought you were saying I was on my cycle and just ending it there. Because I was going to say, aren't we always on our cycle? That's the thing about us women. We are cyclical creatures. We are always somewhere in the cycle, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's always a cycle that's going on, but there are different phases of the cycle that we are going over.
Yeah, you were
constantly.
very in tune with your cycle. I think we were texting or maybe we were on the phone this weekend and you said, oh, something. Oh, but my luteal cycle. So you clearly really track your cycle.
Yes. Yeah, it's something that I started doing but like a year and a half ago. And I don't know, this may be a little TMI, but this is kind of how it all started. Like many people, I got on birth control in high school because I had a very irregular cycle. And this is what was recommended to help make everything normal, make it regular, supposed to help with all your cramps and all these different wonderful things that happen with our period. So I was on it for a while. And like I said, about 2 years ago, came off of it and my body became a wreck at that point. So I didn't have my period for 3 months. And then when it came back with a vengeance, as I like to say, and like to the point where I'm bleeding for 3 weeks. And my hormones are all over the place and my energy levels are all over the place. It was a year of hell. And I laugh at it now. But at the time, it was not good. And so as I was trying to figure out what the heck is going on with me, like why am I emotionally like this? Why am I physically like this? Trying to figure it out with the doctors, not really having any answers there, getting really painful tests done, all this different stuff. And the only solution that the doctor gave me was, well, we could just put an IUD in. I'm like, well, that's not really what I'm wanting. I'm not wanting to be on birth control. I definitely don't want to have an IUD in there because I've heard the horror stories that come along with that. And I came across some different videos on TikTok, of all places, where some women were talking about cycle syncing. And we know that our hormones are at different levels throughout our cycle. That's one of the things that we talked about in the last episode was men have kind of the same hormonal pattern throughout the day. You know, they have a cycle through each day, but it resets every day. But as women, our hormones cycle throughout the month, and that could be 28 days if you have kind of your average cycle length, or it could be 45 days or 60 days, however long that is. And so you're kind of going up and down in all these different ways. I came across these different TikToks that were talking about cycle syncing and about how you can kind of adjust, like kind of like hack your life essentially and hack your cycle by choosing the right activities to do when you have certain energy levels and eating the right food and doing exercise in certain ways to optimize whichever cycle you're in.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a major female biohack kind of thing. But
yeah,
honestly, it's kind of just like the most natural thing that we could do, though. Like, it's not even, shouldn't even be really called a biohack.
right.
Or should it even really be called TMI? I noticed at the beginning, did you realize you said, I don't know if this is TMI? And I often feel that way too when I bring up this kind of stuff. But why should our cycle be too much information? It's literally what brings life to this planet, right?
It's literally the most natural, normal thing that happens with every single woman for the majority of her life. So yeah, like it really shouldn't be TMI, but I mean, how many times have you had a guy be like, oh my gosh, don't talk to me about tampons. Oh, I don't want to hear about this. Oh, don't talk about that. And I think we've just kind of, again, there's a little bit of conditioning. We're just not supposed to talk about lady problems.
It is something that we're kind of conditioned to be hush hush about. So that's what I love, that let's talk about our cycles. And it is not enough information. We cannot have enough information about this. I have read some books, and I did not get on the TikTok train of this, but I have looked into this in my past. I would say I am less in tune right now with like my cycle and more in tune with maybe the moon, which I feel like are very correlated. However, how do you feel about that? Do you agree with the moon cycle being maybe in correlation with your menstrual cycle?
I'm not on board with the moon cycle train. Just because
interesting.
Yeah, I've never noticed a difference according to where the moon is at. And I know that's something that we've kind of like talked about a little bit, where you do feel like when there's a full moon and all these different things that you feel differently, like you feel like your emotions are more affected or energy levels. And whenever you talk about, when the full moon is. I have no idea when the full moon is.
Oh, it's tomorrow.
Okay.
Feel it.
You feel it. And so I'll always kind of do like a little check, and I'm like, do I feel any different? Do I feel like this has affected me? And then I'm like, no, I don't feel like it has. But with my own hormonal cycle, with my own menstrual cycle, I notice it then. So I think kind of the same way that you do with the moon, where you'll notice some differences in how you're feeling or behaving, and then you go and you check and you're like, oh, full moon is coming up. Or maybe you're like, oh, full moon is coming up. Oh yeah, I've been feeling different. For me, it's so like 3 days ago, I'm like, why am I feeling so short-tempered? Why am I feeling like I don't have patience? Why am I know that. Extra tired right now? What is happening? And then I'll be like, let me go check my app, see where I'm at in my cycle. Oh, yep, luteal cycle, right on track.
It's super validating, I think, when you can realize, and it's so funny too. It's like it sneaks up on us every month. I don't know about you, but I'm every month, and I have been on this planet for 38 years and some change. Can that be right? Whoa. I've been on this planet for 38 years, and yet every month since I have been menstruating, it seems to just like, it just comes up where I'm like, oh, this is why I felt a little bit, I don't know if we should, I felt different. I felt strong emotions that felt unnatural. And then it's just like every month I'm like, oh yeah, well, okay. That's what it is.
Oh yeah, that's right. This is happening.
Yeah, this happens
right
every month. But I do find it to be validating.
Yeah. And that's the thing I was going to ask, do you feel like this knowledge of knowing your hormones are different and are obviously going to affect your emotions, do you feel like that has empowered you in how you handle those normal situations when you're not feeling your best?
Oh, absolutely. I think just remembering, it's usually when you have that, for me, when I have the aha moment of, oh, this is why. And I do notice that I do like sync with, not everyone syncs with the moon, but I do change. Like I really feel like the moon does affect my hormones. And I have read a study, and I think it's a very new study. So this is like disclaimer, I might not be saying real science. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but let's talk about it. That it makes sense that our hormones, when they change, it actually changes our brains, like our brain chemistry during that time.
Yeah.
So it really makes sense. It affects our emotions and everything. We're all just chemical soups. We're all just, not victims, but we're all just at the whim of all of our body chemistry, right? With our at the mercy. Thank you. At the mercy of our body chemistry. So it makes sense to me. And I feel like when I'm feeling very, very off, I'm like, oh, I know this feeling will go away in a day or two. And so it's fine. This isn't going to feel so extreme, or I'm not going to feel so tired, or whatever the case may be.
Same. I kind of tell myself, especially if I'm reacting to somebody, I'm like, okay, let's not have a big reaction right now. Let's kind of sit on this for a beat, because this may not be reality, how I'm feeling in this moment. Like, did they actually look at me sideways? Did they actually take a tone with me? Or am I just interpreting it that way because my hormones are more on that negative leaning side of things?
Yeah. So do you feel like your menstrual cycle or the moon cycle, for me, which are seem very correlated, do you feel like it affects you at work? Do you feel like it affects your career and your work day?
Oh yeah. So for me, going back to high school, when we all kind of started with all of this, I was one of those people that I had to skip the first couple of days of my period because, tired, extreme cramps, like just being in so much pain that not able to get off the couch, not able to detach from a heating pad. And that has definitely, carried over into adulthood. The cycle syncing has definitely helped with that, because I've learned exercises and meals and foods and stuff that help, and vitamins and supplements that help with some of those cramps, and like foods to avoid and foods to indulge in. And so it's helped, but there's still the energy levels that are affected. So during that luteal cycle or first couple of days of the period, don't be surprised if I'm taking a nap in the middle of the day, because I'm just exhausted. And that's what my body needs. I've also learned that I need to do less in order to actually be able to get the stuff done. So instead of like trying to pile onto my plate all of these different projects, all of these different tasks, all these different business building things, or all this agent support, let's clients first, making sure that I'm getting whatever done for my clients, making sure we're meeting their deadlines. That always takes priority.
Wow.
And then if I
Rebekah
can do one
puts
or two
her
other
clients
things
over her reproductive part and her cycles. We have to though. Okay, I was curious how much this affected. This is something that affects anybody who works and menstruates. It does. There's no way around it. But I actually found some stats on this. 3 and 5, so like 61% of women surveyed in this survey said that they had to work when they did not feel well enough to work. Because you know what? For example, we're real estate agents. I have a closing this week. I might have really, really debilitating cramps and want to be on my heating pad and want to do this and that. But you know what? I have to get up and I have to go do the final walkthrough.
Yep.
Because the show must go on. So that is a way that our lives are drastically different than, men who like don't menstruate. It does really affect our lives, and we can kind of schedule our lives around it, but only so much, right? Because of the way that that we work, that the way that our modern society is, we have to make money, pay our bills, and we can't totally make everything go around our cycles. Here's another interesting stat though that I found. It's
tell me you're a real estate agent without telling me you're a real estate agent.
I'm really sorry. I
you
have
get
to
a
take
call
this
in the middle of the podcast.
Give me 1 second. So back to the stats, because this I found really interesting. Okay. So we all know, you and I both know, every woman listening to this knows, and probably every man too, if you're paying even remote attention to the world around you, that women have to work when we don't feel well because we have cramps or whatever it may be, whatever phase of the cycle, right? We're all different, but different phases affect us differently. But 2 and 5, so that's roughly 38% or so, feel less confident at work as a result of their period. Have you ever felt less confident at work?
Ooh, less confident?
Less confident. You are a very confident woman.
Competent, like you're...
No. Confident.
Confident. Oh, like the imposter syndrome is real. It's so much
like,
realer.
Some days I go to work, to go get this listing. I'm going to do a listing presentation. I feel super confident, but maybe some days I go to do that listing presentation and maybe I feel like a little crampy. Maybe I feel a little bloated. Maybe I just feel a little bit cranky. And I don't know exactly what it is that affects most women, but I would say that I probably have felt less confident at times because I've been on my cycle. And that's not something I'd really thought about until I saw this little survey here.
Well, let's talk about kind of what's happening during each of these cycles, because there's 4 cycles to your, I think we think about, and I think this is what we're taught kind of growing up, is you get your period and then you're not on your period.
Right.
And then maybe somebody will tell you that there's only like a 3-day window that you can get pregnant when an egg is released.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll hear about that.
Yeah, that's probably the education most people get.
Yeah,
if that.
but that's it. You don't really hear anything else. Like I never heard about a follicular phase or a luteal phase until a year or so ago. So the menstrual phase, which is what we all know, is your period. And that's the beginning. That's typically like that first week.
Yeah.
So that's the start of menstruation. Energy might be lower during this time. And that's when they recommend doing gentle activities like yoga.
Yeah, do lighter stuff that day if you can.
Yeah. Lighter stuff, get iron, get protein, because that's going to be good for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can optimize your cycle syncing during this.
Ooh,
then you have your follicular phase, which is the next week.
That's more energy, right? That's when you're starting to like.
Yeah. So
for me, I feel like
levels are starting to rise up. You're getting some more energy. It's a good time to start those new projects.
Yeah, creativity is flowing, right?
Some more intense physical activity. Start getting back into the gym. Balanced diet, healthy carbs help out. And then you have your ovulatory phase. So this is when that egg is being released. And this is when your energy is at its peak. This is when you are the most vivacious. You may notice that your skin is glowing. You feel more social. You feel more like you're on top of your game. This is a great time to schedule those really big appointments, those big meetings. But as we know, we can't just tell Mr. Seller who wants to list his house next week, oh, sorry, I'm in my menstrual phase or my luteal phase. Can we schedule this in 2 weeks when I'm back in my ovulatory phase?
I mean, we could do a social experiment
and see if that would work.
Yeah. How do you think that would go over?
Can you just put your plans on hold while I get my hormones in order?
I'm going to need you to sign this document to withhold the listing from the MLS until I am in my follicular phase.
Yes.
Yeah.
Until I'm in my follicular ovulatory phase, I need to just put your life on pause.
Yeah.
But yeah, so ovulatory, so we have everything is built up to this moment of ovulation. And then we have the luteal phase and everything starts to crash. And that's when your energy goes down. It's a good time to kind of slow down, to kind of focus on some more nesting or tasks.
Like finish up all the
administrative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like
finish things up. Work. Don't start new things. Probably
no. You're not really
finish
starting
up the
things.
That makes sense. It kind of makes sense. It's like you're going to.
So it's like you.
I guess it's more this, huh?
You
right?
drop.
Literally a cycle.
The event, menstrual, and then you start coming back up, and then you go back down. And so for some people, it's not. You have kind of a gradual going up and down, but then you have other people who have more severe PMS or they have PMDD. And so that's one of the things that I have is the premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And so
when did you find out you had that?
That was something I figured out, I think in my early 20s, mid 20s. So it was before I found out about cycle syncing. Cycle syncing. So before I found out about that, I found out about PMDD. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. There's so many things I discovered that I'm like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And I wish somebody had told me about this sooner. But with that, and that was kind of when I realized, okay, this is not reality. When I'm going through, when I'm feeling these things, it's not reality. And in like a week, if I just put this off, I'll be fine. And so I made that choice of I'm not going to make any big decisions. I'm not going to have big conversations. I'm not going to end relationships or have relationship conversations during this time because it's probably not going to go the way that I actually want it to go. And it's not going to be based off of reality.
What if you had a client where you were representing a client, either the buyer or the seller, and it was a high stakes deal. And they were like, you know what? I need to hold off on this decision on which offer I'm going to accept until I am out of this phase of the cycle. What if we operated like that, you know?
Oh, I'd be like, baby boo, I love this, but
I did have a client once, this is kind of funny, who was not going to sign a contract because they did not make those kinds of decisions when Mercury was in retrograde. So I think I'm going to start saying I'm not going to make decisions either when I'm in my luteal cycle.
Luteal phase. Mm-hmm.
Phase.
You know, there is understanding and being aware of where you're at and how you're being affected by things. And then there's letting things rule your life. And so I'm definitely more of the mindset that I think it's good to be aware of our hormones. I think it's good to be aware of our energy levels and where we're at in different things. But that doesn't define who we are, and it doesn't necessarily define how we react to things. I think it's very easy to be like, oh, I'm PMSing right now, so you just have to take me being rude and yelling and just kind of being a jerk to everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's a valid excuse. You know, we all have to deal with that. Everybody has times when they're not feeling great. It doesn't mean that you get to be rude to other people. But I think it's helpful for you as an individual to be like, oh, okay, I'm short-tempered right now because I'm in this phase. So since I know that I maybe don't react the best way all the time to stuff, it's okay to take a beat or take a little bit more time to make big decisions. But I don't think it's a wise choice to be like, I'm just not going to make any decisions, or I'm not going to do anything during this time.
There does have to be definitely some kind of balance.
Yeah. You have to have balance. You can't just stop doing life. That's not how it works.
Something interesting I heard. Have you heard this? That actually the U.S. women's soccer team does their practice schedule based on cycle syncing methods.
I had no idea. And I think that's amazing.
So there are people that are really adopting this. There's some cool stuff I think that we can really accomplish when we learn to embrace this. I feel like me as a woman growing up, I was really, really conditioned that we don't really like talk about periods. We didn't, at least for me, like I didn't celebrate getting my period. It was the kind of this thing that it was like really embarrassing and gross. And it was like, I saw these commercials I remember on TV that were like, here is how you should wear a tampon because you can just do whatever that day anyway and pretend you're not on your period because we should be ashamed of being on our period, or you can't do things when, you know, instead of just like embracing it and working with the cycle, it was like this thing that we had to ignore and overcome. We had to overcome it like it was a bad thing when it's not. It's maybe it's one of our superpowers.
It's definitely one of our superpowers. Maybe not in the luteal phase, but in the other phases, yes, you can get so much done. And so that was one of the things that I noticed is when I started kind of focusing more, like rolling with my energy levels instead of trying to force myself and force my body to do what everyone said I should be doing. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on during these different times. And I was able to get so much more done. And I felt more at peace, like mentally and emotionally as well, because I wasn't going through that shame guilt cycle of like, oh, I'm not doing all the things.
You hit it with that word, the shame guilt cycle. Both of like what you maybe aren't accomplishing at 100% that you would at a different phase of your cycle, and just the societal shame and guilt. At least maybe you didn't experience that, but I experienced that from how I was conditioned to look at my period and think about my body and my reproductive part. And that's something I think that's really, really specific to us as women that I think a lot of men probably don't understand because they, they don't have cycles and periods. Yeah. How could they?
I mean, a lot of women don't even know about this side. So how could we expect men to be like, oh, we expect you to be aware of how a menstrual cycle works and where the different energy levels, they have no idea. And I don't expect them to.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be interesting if we went through life and we all really celebrated our cycles? I've heard more and more about young women and girls having period parties when they get their first period. And I just think that's actually so the cutest idea. And I never heard of, like, we never did that when we were that age. But what would happen if suddenly magically, like, getting your period or being in a certain phase of your cycle became this like enviable, boast-worthy, amazing event rather than this drag of a thing that we had to not talk about, be embarrassed about, or overcome. We had to stick a tampon up and just overcome and, go do the crazy day at sports and PE class or whatever we had to do that day. We had to overcome it. Do you know those ads on commercials that I'm talking about? That they're just like, you can do it anyway.
This is your active tampon.
The active tampon.
I think it's funny that you bring up tampons. My friend, she sent me this video today, just right before we started recording. And it was a video talking about how, and I think I sent it to our little group chat, that apparently it's only been since August of 2023, so August of last year, that scientists started testing menstrual cycle products with menstrual blood. They were using water or some other fluid before that, which is totally different than menstrual blood.
I mean, I remember the commercials growing up. They would just have that blue liquid. Oh my gosh, we couldn't show blood. How gross and embarrassing.
And it can't be red. It's got to be blue.
Red. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, there's just a lot of bizarre things.
I'm excited to kind of re-dive back into this. I'll tell you what I do for my cycle. Okay. It's pretty basic. I have gotten into this in more detail and tried to work my month around it and then just kind of got out of the habit. But I give myself grace when I'm not feeling great. And the day of my menstrual phase, so first day or two of my period, I just make sure I don't do any heavy exercise. That for me, for some reason, that's really simple to remember in my mind and really easy to do. I just think we have this culture that we're just always told we need to work out really hard all the time. And I don't think as women that's super healthy and definitely not healthy in certain phases of our cycle to put all this extra stress on our bodies when our hormones are supposed to be doing this natural thing and we're kind of putting stress hormones, on them. So that's kind of what I do. And that kind of works for me. But I'm going to try and look into seeing if I can work my listings and my escrows around my cycle, see if anybody goes for that. I'll report back in a year, let you know. Or a month.
Let me know how
29 and a half days. It takes approximately 1.5 female cycles to close a house in Hawaii. How many cycles does it take you in Washington?
It takes 1.
Wow. You fancy.
Yeah. I know. Here on the mainland, we work a little bit faster than you guys.
Is that what you do? Yeah. We're just over here celebrating cycles, okay? We just want a little extra time.
It takes 45 days for those who don't speak
Sometimes
cycle.
2 full cycles, yeah. But, it depends on, the individual cycle. But, yeah. 45 to 60 days.
So that's one of my cycles then. And then
one of your cycles is 45 days?
Yeah.
One cycle.
My luteal phase is 3 weeks.
This just shows you how different we all are.
I love it. What's that?
This shows how different we all are.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is that's where I think it's helpful to track your cycle. And you don't have to pay for an app for it. If you have an iPhone, Apple Health does it. You just log when your period is, and it will tell you if it's abnormal, which I found that to be very helpful. After 3 months of me bleeding for 3 weeks at a time, it's hey, so this isn't normal. You should go to a doctor. It's thank you, Apple Health, for letting me know.
Wow, technology for the win right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you can do it there. You don't or just track it on your computer or your calendar. You don't have to get a special app, even though they have apps out there for that. But just being aware of how long your normal cycle is, I think helps you empower yourself to work at your best and give yourself grace when you're not in the best or most optimal energy, brain space. It's okay to feel fuzzy headed. If you have ADHD, guess what? It's going to be a little bit more ADHD during that time. And that's really normal.
Yeah.
And if you don't have ADHD, it's perfectly normal to feel a little ADHD during that time, just because our brains are working differently. They're firing off differently. And as you said, everyone is different. So some women may have that super consistent 28-day cycle and they hardly notice a difference in between. And that's awesome. Great. Other people may be more in that 60-day and they notice really big changes. And there's everything all in between that. So it's figuring out what works for you and what is best for your lifestyle and your hormone cycle.
I love it. I am going to do some more research. I'm going to sit down, since I'm self-employed. There's a lot I can't control about my schedule being a real estate agent, but there is a lot that I can. So I'm going to sit down and figure out how I can optimize my month based on my cycle for the things that I have a little room in my schedule to move around when I do it, when I create content, when I write, when I come up with, different things to serve my client, when I'm going out and driving all over the island, which is a little more physically exhausting. If I have control over that, I think I'm going to look at my cycle and optimize. It's a great conversation.
Optimize those projects. Batch that content.
Yes, I love it.
Take it easy for 2 weeks after that.
So much great information. This has been a fun conversation.
So fun. And you can follow us in all the phases of our cycles on Instagram over at Two Girls in the Market. Like, subscribe, share this with your friends if you think they could learn a little bit about cycle syncing, which we probably didn't go super in depth on it, but gives you a little bit of an overview, and we'll share more notes about it in the show notes.
Yeah, talking about cycles. Bye, everyone.
Until next time.